Whoa! That B-roll was straight fire. As you might have guessed, the topic of this video is how you can 3D print, finish, and paint your very own Deliver a Prop from Fallout 4. I'm Yasu from Hero Creations, and let's get into it. So we start out with a raw print, which is mostly printed in whole pieces. That is, the gun, the magazine, and the silencer. Though in this case, I split up the silencer to fit into one of my smaller, more precise printers. For this tutorial, I've already glued the magazine in place. Since I used wood filament to print the handle grips, I'm leaving those off the rest of the assembly for a hot second. Now while the raw print quality is overall good, we had some gnarly stepping on some of the parts, which is caused by the print orientation. This is much harder to patch with filler primer, so I'm using Bondo spot putty to fill it in. As you can see, I'm taking small beads of it and spreading it evenly with my fingers. For this process, you will want to be wearing gloves and a respirator, since it's super toxic. It does not take long for the spot putty to dry, and then we can move on to sanding the putty smooth and level it with the rest of the print. Chances are that you'll have to repeat this process a few times until any stepping disappears. The next step for me was to smooth the normal print lines on the rest of the print using filler primer. I used Rust-Oleum, but really any brand of thicker, sandable primer or Automotive 2K primer will work just fine for this step. When spraying, take care to do quick passes and try to evenly build up from various angles, but don't overspray. Now one thing you'll notice is when the primer's wet, it looks like the lines have been completely filled in, but once it's dry, the print lines somehow reappear. Don't worry, this is perfectly normal as the primer is prone to shrinkage as it dries. Your next step will be use 200 grit sandpaper, or my personal favorite, sanding sponges, and start lightly sanding the primed parts. Naturally, the part will be smoother, but not 100% smooth. So repeat spraying the filler primer and sand with a higher grit and continue to keep working your way up. The key is that you want the imperfections to diminish with each grit of sandpaper. So if you still find yourself at, say, 1000 grit and there are deep lines still, step down another grit or downgrade to another grit and try again. Alright, remember those wood filament grips? Let's talk about those. Normally, you can stain these with wood stain, but my wood stain was either defective or the filament just wouldn't take it because it just wouldn't stick, the wood stain that is. So I ended up finding a workable solution using lever dye. I did, however, have to lay it on thick and in several coats. And there you go, wood filament grips that look pretty decent and are easier than having me hand paint a wood effect with PLA. But back to the main parts. I ended up being super finicky and spent a bit more time sanding and priming to remove any traces of the print lines. You don't have to be as thorough as I was, but I will say you will be rewarded with a nicer finished product if you spend a bit more time on sanding. Once I was happy with how smooth the texture of my model was, I moved on to gluing the silencer to the rest of the pistol. Since I don't actually have any footage of me doing that, enjoy this reenactment of me doing that with a 3D model. Now to the fun stuff, painting. I started by laying down a base coat of semi-gloss black paint. Then I took a cheap chip brush from Harbor Freight and started dry brushing a dark metallic silver on all over it, but focusing on the edges to make it look more worn there. Then I took a lighter shade of acrylic metallic silver paint and started dry brushing the edges, but focusing on the grip. The idea here is the grip is slightly lighter toned than the body of the pistol. Once I felt good about the dry brushed metallics, it's time to add the dirt and the rust. To do this, I started with a dark brown paint and a softer brush, and again took a tiny bit of paint and dry brushed it, but this time in a more of a stippling motion, and doing it in strategic areas. If there's too much, I'd wipe it away before it dried. For the best effect, focus on the edges and the recesses of the gun. That is, where the dirt and the grease is most likely to collect in the real world. Repeat this with a lighter shade of brown to add some variation and contrast. Now the actual rust on this particular prop showed it had a bluish patina sort of rust. So I took some turquoise paint and put very small amounts over some of the dirtied recesses. Now, subtle though, you don't want to overdo this and ruin all your prior effect work. The last and final touches to this prop was to add real hardware in the form of real screws and bolts, and to glue the grips with super glue. From there, I coated the whole thing with a clear coat to protect the paint job. And boom, you have a convincing looking prop. Now if you plan to take this to a con or another event, you'll want to put an orange cap on the barrel, or wrap the end of it with orange masking tape. In my case here, this prop was sent to my friends at Wasteland Exports for display at their Museum of Wasteland History, which is an awesome Fallout themed pop-up display that makes its rounds at various conventions. And so it's locked away in a neat little case for display. Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. I hope you found that tutorial useful. Let me know what you thought about, anything I can do to improve. I know my editing is not the best. I'm really new at this. Like, I'm only a dozen or so videos in. I'm always looking to figure out and improve what I can do to make my tutorials better and clearer and cooler. It helped me greatly if you subscribe to my channel, and I'm going to be pushing out a torrent of new content and updates and all kinds of new 3D printed stuff in the next couple of weeks. And in case you are actually interested in my 3D model, such as the Deliverer model I used in this particular tutorial, you can grab them from my Patreon at patreon.com/HeroCreations, link in the description. Anyways, I'll see you in the next video. Feel free to smash that like button, hit that subscribe button, and ring the notification bell. Thank you so much.